Yet behind the leadership chatter, well, the business of government does go on, and this week saw a major change in health insurance. Our program guest this morning is the Minister for Health, Tanya Plibersek. But before then, we'll take a look at the papers this morning, and Rudd rage, Lenore. Rudd rage is all the rage.
Absolutely. Needless to say, the Rudd video offtakes are across all the papers this morning. They were posted on YouTube last night anonymously under the title "Kevin Rudd is a happy Vegemite." It was apparently a video that Kevin Rudd was trying to make in early 2010 for Chinese New Year, written in Mandarin, and apparently the language that had been written for him, the script that had been written for him, was very flowery and he kept messing it up, and hence the frustration. I guess the question now is how this is all going to play. I mean, clearly the intent of those who put it out there anonymously is to remind everyone about bad Kevin, sweary Kevin, angry Kevin. But Kevin Rudd immediately tried to turn it around and went in and did that interview that you showed some of earlier.
That was at 11:30
about
last
11:30
night,
last night on Sky, where he used it to give his message to caucus effectively. I've changed, I'm now consultative, I know I didn't consult enough, I know I didn't delegate enough, I'm different, I've learnt, which is a message that, absent that video, he probably wouldn't have been able to get out just yet, because it would have been seen to be sort of openly stirring things up.
OK, well, just before we discuss the impact of the video, Michael, then, of course, just so that we follow Kevin Rudd through the whole night, he then headed off for Mexico.
He's got a. This is actually the first meeting, G20 meeting, of foreign ministers, which is a little bit of a surprise. But I think the foreign ministers was due to go out this morning to Mexico with the G20 foreign ministers meeting. Then he's going to Washington. He's going to see Leon Panetta, the Defence Secretary, and David Petraeus, the head of the CIA. They talk about Iran, Afghanistan. Then he goes to London. I think there's a meeting and then he goes to Tunis.
Piracy, I think. London is piracy.
So these are all important meetings.
And Syria, and then he comes back to Malaysia. So, you know, there has been sort of stories and issues about the Foreign Minister travelling a lot, but this is what Foreign Ministers do. So he's got some fairly big sort of meetings, and G20, of course, can be seen as one of Kevin Rudd's babies. Yep. He's probably been, I would imagine, critical of the way Julia Gillard and perhaps Wayne Swan have handled it, and he'll want to sort of take control of at least what foreign ministers meeting can do on G20.
OK, well, now, Fran, on the video itself, it reminds people, I guess, as Lenore said, that the guy had a bad temper. I guess a lot of people knew that, but this is the first time that people actually get to see it for themselves.
Well, that's true. Is that going to make much of a difference? This wasn't aimed at the general public. This is aimed at the backbench, reminding the backbench that this guy is no saint. He was actually an awfully difficult leader. Things went very wrong, went very awry under his leadership, and this is why, because he's a hothead. It's all about Kevin. You know, that's clearly the message to the backbenchers. The problem is, as Lenore said, that message that Kevin Rudd then put out later on Sky about being able to delegate, more consultative, slowing down a little, is the message that a lot of backbenchers want to hear. Because they're stuck in this, they want a way out, they want to know that Kevin actually has changed, and, you know, that's why we're seeing some of the breakouts here.
And he did also get that little subtle message in on Sky that it could have only come from the PMO, the Prime Minister's office, or the department.
Maybe the department, yeah.
Maybe.
I also don't know that people mind too much if their Prime Minister is a hothead, if they think the Prime Minister's doing a great job. I don't know that Prime Ministers have to be saints, but they do need to be doing a good job.
Now this that release of the video pipped what was otherwise quite a sensational story as well, with the Labor backbenchers saying that she should stand down. Yeah,
this is Darren Cheeseman. He's the member for Corangamite in Victoria, which is the most marginal seat in the country. He holds it by just a handful of votes, literally a handful of votes. And he's come out and said Julia Gillard's basically can't take us forward, the public's made up its mind, and this is putting names to faces now. The commentary around this latest leadership challenge is that it's different because it's not led by the factions, it's a bottoms-up, it's a caucus-led revolt. Here we have a caucus member stepping out, naming it, putting his name to it and saying, she can't do it, we've got to move to Kevin.
And Darren Cheeseman was one of the many caucus members who were not formally lobbied but sounded out by key Gillard-backing ministers last week. And I'm told some of those ministers were going around sort of telling marginal seat holders what the electorate thinks. And I think what Darren Cheeseman is saying is he knows what his electorate thinks, and his electorate has turned off Julia Gillard. I mean, that's what he's trying to say.
Well, if you want to know how rough this is going to get through this week, Steve Gibbons, from the member for Bendigo, has just tweeted this, that only a psychopath with a giant ego would line up again after being comprehensively rejected by the overwhelming majority of his colleagues. Now,
I think it's quite fraught.
I think those both Cheeseman and Gibbons have neighbouring elections. Perhaps they can meet at the border and sort it out. But if that's an indication of what's to come, it's not going to be pretty.
It's not pretty now. I mean, already we've got a Cabinet Minister, Nicola Roxon, coming out publicly and saying, you know, backing Julia...
Yeah, just on that, we've got Nicola Roxon, so we'll have a look at it.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say it was a little more measured than Steve Gibbons' contribution, but here it is.
I don't think we should whitewash history. Whilst there are a lot of very, very good things that our government did with Kevin as Prime Minister, there were also a lot of challenges. And it's Julia that has seen through fixing a lot of those problems. She's had a lot of guts. She's copped an enormous amount of personal abuse. We've had a minority government, and nevertheless, she has toughed it through and delivered.
Measured, that's true, but my point was going to be that she went on to say Julia's been a miracle worker, in a sense, in what she's been able to deliver in this climate. So, given that the position we're at, there's no doubt this is, I think, a leadership challenge is inevitable. Good chance there'll be a change of leader. Cabinet ministers are standing up, declaring themselves quite strongly and publicly for the person who ultimately, you know, many people think will lose here.
But I think
it's high risk
stuff. Where have you got a situation where a minister has publicly said they'll be supporting Kevin Rudd?
I haven't seen it yet.
No,
but
we're getting it the other way.
Yeah,
what they're doing is supporting their leader.
Yeah, but we're getting
publicly.
it. Yes, true. But in that support of the leader, we're also getting a swipe at the other guy. That's the difference.
And I mean, if a cabinet minister stood up and said they couldn't support the leader, they'd have to go to, you know, they'd have to leave the cabinet.
Yeah,
but I think what we're getting to here is that this is a leadership fight qualitatively different from ones we've seen before. It's not just about whose turn it is, whether someone has a better claim to the job. People who are entrenched in these camps really see the opponent as having no legitimacy, no sort of... It's a moral fight. There's no moral claim to the job. It's dirtier and nastier and more visceral than any fight on any side of politics I've seen.
Say, going back to Howard and Peacock, it was about Wets versus Dries with Hawke and Keating and even Costello and Howard. It was about entitlement after a while. But
it wasn't about you've got no claim to this job and you will destroy the party, which is, in this fight, what each is saying about the other.
And of course, if you look at the position the party's in, it's destroyed at this moment if you look at their primary vote.
Yeah. Now, Michael, we don't want to ignore important stories on the coalition side of politics as well, and I think Andrew Robb has thrown in an interesting one. Well,
this is nowhere near as exciting as the Kevin Bloody Wilson videotape that we've just seen, but it's the Liberals, the coalition, of course, has had problems over their budget policy, and Tony Abbott, Andrew Robb, Joe Hockey have been a little bit all over the place about what they're going to do about the budget. In the Sunday Age, Andrew Robb comes out and says all the promises we're making, which could include winding back the putting back in the 30% private health insurance rebate and other promises they're making, have to wait until they get the budget back in surplus and they pay off all the debt. So it's Abbott, the populist Conservative, wanting to promise spending, tax cuts and a budget surplus. You can't do all that, and the Finance Minister's trying to get policy back on track and saying some of the promises have to wait.
So he's putting a lot of promises on hold. You would think that would include the parental leave scheme, for one.
Well, that's up in the air. Of course, Abbott's also promised general tax cuts, and there's no real sign that the opposition can do all this. You just can't deliver all these things which they're trying to do.
And in any case, wasn't Tony Abbott headed in this direction? Let's hear what he had to say about the rebate.
The private health insurance rebate is an article of faith for the coalition. In government, we will restore it as soon as we can.
Is your position on the budget go into deficit in order to restore it?
We will restore the private health insurance rebate as soon as we can.
So it's a curious thing, all these payments for people who the coalition say they see as aspirational people, so people earning sort of $200,000 plus, are an article of faith, but also smaller government is an article of faith. I don't get how you can have both those articles of faith at the same time.
The private health insurance rebate, to some degree, I think he's saying it's an article of faith because I think he's been pushed to that from within his own joint party room. Several people made a pretty big claim to it the other day. Whereas the parental leave scheme, that's not an article of faith for most of them. That is Tony Abbott's article of faith, and that's what makes it difficult for someone
like
to
But either way,
make
it contradicts with small government.
It also extends to promises, aspirational promises on disability pensions,
dental
and dental and Medicare. So what we're seeing really is the political process and the players still promising big new entitlement programs really at the top of the mining boom, and the real question is whether the political system can deliver this and get the budget back into balance, and it's very unlikely that it can.
OK, well, that's the Sunday Papers, and we'll go to our program guest now, the Health Minister Tanya Plibersek, who joins us from our Sydney studio.